Chasing the Mind Podcast, Episode 0. Who are we and why are we here? Welcome to Chasing the Mind, hosted by Dr. Angela Johnson and Dr. Stephanie Schwartz, the podcast that explores the art and science of the mind. Each episode, we will feature a topic or guest who offers a unique perspective in answering the following questions. How do our thoughts influence our sense of who we are? How do we impact the world around us? And can changing our mind change everything? I'm Kevin Johnson, the executive producer and production manager and sound manager. Today, Dr. Angela and Dr. Stephanie introduce themselves and the Chasing the Mind podcast. Doctors, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Schwartz. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology with experience in neuropsychology, and I'm currently the professor of psychology at a local university.
I'm Dr. Angela Johnson. I also have a doctorate in clinical psychology with an emphasis in forensic psychology. I work primarily with individuals who are before the courts.
So who are you personally?
I'm kind of a nerd. This is Dr. Stephanie. And I have both multiple fandoms, including Marvel Comics and Harry Potter and all those kinds of nerd pursuits. But I am also kind of a science nerd, so I'm fascinated by biology and the world around us from a scientific perspective. And I'm also kind of creative. I enjoy making pottery and all kinds of other artistic pursuits.
I am Dr. Angela. I am a wife and a mom. I am also the mother to a 106-pound Labradoodle and 6 chickens that I am expecting to give eggs anytime now. I spend most of my time when I'm not working on my 115-year-old Victorian home. And my husband and I like to do projects around the house and cook and have dinner parties and have people over and have really interesting conversations. I am nerd adjacent in that I have, most of my friends are involved in gaming and gaming conventions, and I am learning about the Marvel Universe as we speak. Actually, I'm working my way through the Marvel Universe chronologically. I am up to what? I think
Thor?
I've gotten through Thor. I think I'm up to Daredevil. Yeah.
She's actually literally nerd adjacent right now. She has our sound engineer sitting to the right of her and me, Dr. Stephanie, sitting across from her. So literally nerd adjacent right now.
Okay, then. How did you two meet?
We met in graduate school, actually.
Yes, we started graduate school together on the East Coast. Actually, the funny thing is that although we are on the East Coast right now, we went to graduate school on the East Coast. Both Dr. Stephanie and myself are from California, although I wasn't born in California, but I spent most of my life in California. She is from Southern California.
Oh my God.
I am from Northern California. And yet we both found ourselves in the same graduate program in psychology. And actually we ended up the second year, we ended up in the same placement. You were doing the neuropsych rotation at Lemuel Shattuck, and I was doing the clinical and forensic assessment piece over on the other side. So we have both spent time in graduate school together and worked together.
Why are you doing this podcast?
Well, I said this to a professor once. I said if I wasn't interested in psychology and working in psychology, I would probably just be like rifling through people's drawers, because people fascinate me. The things that people do, the ways that they think, who they are, why they are the way that they are, all those things fascinate me. And I suspect there are some similarities for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the reason for doing the podcast was I thought about all the interesting people that I know and all the stories that they tell and all the ways that they look at the world. And I find it interesting, and I find it stimulating, and I when I have them over at my house and we sit around a table and we eat food and we have a couple of drinks and people start sharing their experiences and stories. I mean, people I've known for years and years who will tell me this amazingly fascinating story from their past. And I think, wow, this is so amazing that the human experience is so broad. So I thought, gosh, shouldn't we sort of talk about that? I mean, that's what psychology really is. You can sort of break it down academically, but it's really about people's stories. It's how these things impact them in the ways that they see the world, in the ways that they change and interact with the world. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore.
I think that when Dr. Angela talks about her enjoyment of food and enjoyment of these conversations that take place around the kitchen table, we really do want to bring that to our listeners and also to our guests. If our guests are being interviewed face to face, because they can, they will be getting a lovely, lovely dinner made by Dr. Angela and our engineer, Kevin Johnson. And so we're inviting you, the listener, into these kitchen table discussions.
And we are literally recording on the kitchen table.
Yes, we are.
And I think a picture of that will be going up on our website. Also, it's interesting how different paths bring a variety of people together. For example, when I first met Dr. Angela, I found her incredibly intimidating and scary. She wore a leather jacket. At the time, she did smoke, although neither of us is an advocate of smoking. Kids, don't start. It's hard to quit. But anyways, she was with the cool kids in graduate school, if you can imagine such a thing exists, with her leather jacket and her cigarettes, looking super cool. And I was very intimidated. And I think Dr. Angela had a different understanding of me than she does now.
Well, I kind of thought you were a little bit of a cheerleader for the school and the program, which is really funny in hindsight. But yes, no, you definitely came across as someone who was incredibly enthusiastic about things in a very, I don't know how to say it other than kind of rah-rah kind of way. And now that I've gotten to know you over these, almost 20 years, I now know your cynical, dark underbelly, which is...
I have inner snark.
You have inner snark, yes. And yes, it just was not immediately apparent.
What is chasing the mind?
I think partly, as we've mentioned, chasing the mind is bringing interesting people and interesting conversations to our listeners. We have a variety of great guests planned, which we'll probably talk about in a moment. But we also want to ask questions that we all wonder about, but sometimes aren't brave enough to ask.
I also think that psychology as a discipline has really exploded in the public mind. I mean, you look at, as Dr. Stephanie mentioned, she teaches at a university. They can't put enough psychology classes on the schedule. There's so many students who are interested in learning about themselves, learning about the world, learning about the way that their families operate, the way the world operates. All of these things, I think we are trying to understand as human beings, come down to these principles in psychology that are best understood through the stories that we tell each other. It's one thing to sort of talk about a psychological concept. It's another thing to hear someone tell us a story or tell us about their experience in a way that really brings that concept to life.
And the variety of topics and stories is really what brought me to the field of psychology in the first place. As I've mentioned, I'm a biology nerd. I'm a science nerd, and psychology is a science. There's data, there's research, but psychology and clinical work is also very much an art. And I also have that part of me, the clinical part that wants to help heal the world, and the creative part that sees the art of being a clinician as something beautiful.
So tell us a little bit about some of the guests that you have lined up.
Well, one of our first guests will be Trey, who is a LARPer, which means she engages in live action role play, something very nerdy. That episode will be called, I believe, When Nerds Go Outdoors. That's what it is?
Something like Geeks Go Outdoors.
When Geeks Go Outdoors.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
I believe it was outside.
Oh, when they go outside.
When geeks go outside.
So that episode will be called When Geeks Go Outside. And we are fascinated to understand how stories are played out creatively with people who might have previously only been interested in video games.
Well, and also she talks a lot about the way that the telling of the stories, the acting out of the stories, really cultivates a certain skill set in the individuals that play these games that they then carry over into other areas of their lives, which I think is really interesting. We also have, we're going to have a professor from Tufts University talking about, afterlife possibilities, what happens to our consciousness after we die. I think that'll be a fascinating discussion.
And about her personal quest and drive to search for answers about life after death and about consciousness after death, because it's been very central to her life.
We have someone who's going to come up talking about beauty standards, the ideas of beauty, what that means. She's a professional hairdresser. She's been working in the field for many years. Expectations of beauty, especially for women. Well,
also about the intimate relationships between people and their hairdressers. We're calling that episode Bartender Without the Alcohol, I believe.
I think it's without the booze.
Bartender without the booze.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is catchier, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
So we will be talking to her about what it's like to have these relationships with people that are really just customers and how those relationships evolve over time. We'll be having a lot of really fascinating guests. I'm excited for people to hear the ones we've already recorded, but I'm also excited for the interviews that we have upcoming on our schedule and roster, because there are a lot of great conversations that we get to have. Also, on our website, we will be having an area where if you are interested in being a guest on Chasing the Mind, or you have concept ideas, interviews you would like to hear us do, topics you would like to hear us address, we would love to hear from you. So that will be on chasingthemind.com. Make sure to subscribe.
Thank you, doctors. So please check out our website at chasingthemind.com. There you can subscribe to upcoming podcasts, see blog posts to find out more information about things that happen during each episode, and you can contact us if you have any ideas that you want to hear in upcoming episodes. Or if you want to be a guest on our podcast, you can sign up on our website.